Do you know, even just a ballpark estimate of approximately how much in fees your firm has been paid for the bankruptcy work?
Approximately $2 million.
And do you have, again, ballpark number of how much Paul Hastings has been paid for its bankruptcy work?
Approximately $25 million.
And can you remind us how much in assets have been recovered to the bankruptcy estate?
Over $100 million.
Ms. Loftus, if we could go to 1404B. Mr. Skalka, do you remember looking at this transcript when we broke yesterday?
Yes.
And what was the date of this meeting of creditors?
April 6, 2020.
How soon after the bankruptcy proceedings were filed, just for context?
A month and a half after the filing.
Now, Mr. Skalka, after the meeting of creditors we were just looking at, did there come a time when a bankruptcy trustee was appointed in Mr. Kwok's case?
Yes.
Approximately when was he appointed?
He was appointed by order of the bankruptcy court in June 16th of 2022.
Ms. Loftus, could we please publish Government Exhibit 6-194? Mr. Skalka, do you recognize who's shown in the top left here?
I recognize the person in the picture.
Who is that?
That's the Chapter 11 trustee.
Mr. Skalka, were you the subject of any protest?
I was not.
Were there any protest related to the bankruptcy of Mr. Kwok?
Yes.
Who was the subject of those protests?
The Chapter 11 trustee was the subject of some of the protests.
Who else, if anyone, was the subject of the protest?
Paul Hastings' law firm was the subject of protest. PAX was a subject of protest, and the law firm representing PX was a subject of protest.
Were any family members?
Yes. The daughter of the Chapter 11 trustee.
Mr. Skalka, in your 35 years of bankruptcy-related practice, how common are such protests?
This is the first case I've seen these types of protest.
Mr. Skalka, are Mr. Kwok's bankruptcy proceeding ongoing?
Yes.
Has PX been repaid, based upon Kwok's personal guarantee?
No.
Have any creditors been repaid yet?
None of the pre-bankruptcy, often referred to as pre-petition creditors, have been paid. Ongoing expenses during the bankruptcy case are being paid.
Mr. Skalka, you mentioned PAX's law firm. What law firm is that?
O'Melveny and Myers.
Good morning. Could you tell me again the bankruptcy trustee's name?
Luc Despins.
Now, Mr. Ferguson asked you over your last 35 years of bankruptcy. Have you ever seen protest?
I believe the question was in bankruptcy cases.
How common are Chapter 11 bankruptcy filings for individuals?
They're not as common as they are corporate entities, but I've been involved in several of them over the years.
Of the several of them that you've been involved in over the years, have any of those people been the subject of plots by the Chinese Communist Party to return them to China?
No.
Have any of them been the subject of a plot to kidnap that person and return them to China?
No.
Have any of them been the subject of a plot to discredit them online? Let me rephrase that. Discredit them online specifically by the Chinese Communist Party?
No.
Are you aware that Mr. Guo, all of those things happened to him?
I'm not.
So that's unprepared for your testimony today. Mr. Ferguson did not discuss that with you, correct?
No.
And could we have back up the photo of from the protest? I think it's GXVIA 194 maybe. You remember you were asked some questions about this by Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Do you have any familiarity with what the phrase CCP running dog means?
No.
And do you see on that poster, do you see where it says take down the CCP?
Yes.
Do you understand this to associate Mr. Despins with the CCP?
I'm not sure what this is trying to be communicated by that poster other than, I just don't know.
Let's screen out, let's zoom out real quick. Now, do you see the bottom there's a number $250 million?
Yes.
And you see above it says extortionist appointed by the DOJ?
Yes.
Does that figure $250 million have any significance in the context of the PAX settlement negotiations?
I don't know. I have not been a party to the settlement negotiation between PAX and Mr. Kwok.
Mr. Despins has though, right?
Mr. Despins is the trustee representing the estate, which includes many creditors, not just PAX.
You're aware that there were negotiations between PAX and Mr. Guo's counsel to settle PAX's claims, correct? Were there any negotiations between Mr. Despins and Mr. Guo's counsel to settle the bankruptcy?
There was a court-ordered mediation in the bankruptcy, and so there were negotiations. As part of that bankruptcy court-ordered mediation,
did Mr. Despins make a demand as part of that court-ordered mediation?
I was not present during the mediation, so I believe he did, but I was not present for those mediation sessions.
To your understanding, what was that demand?
I don't know.
Now, you see it says appointed by DOJ. I think on direct you testified about someone named Ms. Claiborne?
Yes.
Who is she again?
Ms. Claiborne is a trial attorney for the Office of the United States Trustee.
And the Office of the United States Trustee, is that in any particular department?
My understanding it's a branch of the Department of Justice.
And the Office of the Trustee makes recommendations as to Chapter 11 trustees to the bankruptcy court, right?
Yes.
That's what happened in this case, right?
Yes.
So someone from Mr. Claiborne's office recommended Mr. Despins, right?
Yes.
Was Mr. Despins the first trustee put forward to your knowledge?
He was not.
Who was the first one?
I don't recall the individual's name.
Do you have an understanding as to why there was a second trustee put forward?
My understanding is the first trustee had a conflict or conflicts.
And as part of Mr. Despins' selection, let me withdraw. As a general matter, is there any kind of vetting done of a potential Chapter 11 trustee?
It is my understanding that there is some vetting done, yes.
What's your understanding of what that vetting is?
There's an interview process. U.S. trustee office contacts people that they believe might be a qualified candidate to be a trustee, and at some point, once they get down to a few candidates, my understanding is that there is some conflicts review being done by each candidate before they're selected.
And is it your understanding that that process happened in Mr. Guo's bankruptcy?
Yes.
Now, you remember Mr. Ferguson asked you about, are there any death sentences in bankruptcy cases? You remember that?
Yes.
Do you know if there are any death sentences possible under Chinese criminal law?
I do not know.
Now, you were also asked some questions about the PX litigation on direct, right?
Yes.
Now, PX filed its complaint against Mr. Guo on April 18, 2017, correct?
It was filed in early 2017. I don't recall the exact date.
I'm going to see if I can help you out with that. Can we put up just for the witness and the parties DX 7006, please? So the question solely is, does looking at this document refresh your recollection as to the date of the filing of the PX complaint?
Yes.
Was that date April 18, 2017?
Yes.
You're aware that that's the day before the Chinese government filed an Interpol red notice against Mr. Guo, right?
I'm not aware of that.
You're aware that that's the day before Mr. Guo did a live interview about Chinese corruption for Voice of America, right?
I'm not aware of that.